Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to Movie Oubliette, episode 159, the Continental Traversing podcast with me, Dan, living my dip era down here in Melbourne, Australia. And joining me today
is me, Serge of Cold Crash Pictures, having all his free time taken up by a new kitten in Seattle, Washington.
Hey. Yes. In this podcast, we discuss heatedly over sci-fi, horror, and fantasy films, which have been long forgotten because we love a good B-movie that definitely isn't ripping off a major movie franchise. So, as you can hear, listeners, Conrad isn't here with me today, but we have, as a stand-in repeat offender to the podcast and champion of Saurian and cryptid cinema from the YouTube channel Cold Crash Pictures, it's Serge Bodnarchuk. Hello.
Hi.
Serge.
Thanks for having me on. This is very auspicious to have been asked to guest star twice in a single year.
I know. Yes, it hasn't happened that many times with our guests, but welcome back.
Yeah.
How's the kitten going?
The kitten's going great. I adopted him 1 week ago at the time of this recording, so it'll be 2 weeks by the time it airs. But he's just he's an all black rag doll. So he's this little fluff ball that he's 90% fluff by volume, and you pick him up and he just goes completely limp.
Oh, but you currently have a cat as well, though.
Yes, I have a 4.5-year-old tabby who unfortunately is the introduction's going slow because my 4-year-old tabby Thomason has always displayed hostility towards other cats, and so
right,
we're giving each of them things to sniff that the other one has played with, and sort of letting them see each other under very controlled conditions, but they have not stood in the same room yet.
Yes, yeah. It's a slow process. It will work out eventually.
So what's in the mailbag today, Dan?
Well, we got a message from Jasmine because we did, for one of our minisodes, FRO 7, Freddy as FRO 7, that very strange British animated movie. And because it was one that she kept recommending to do on the podcast, but we decided to do it as a minisode. And she said, so I remember seeing the TV trailers for this when it came out, or rather the Soul TV trailer. And then years later, she went searching for it. And then she said, it wasn't until I found it on YouTube a few years ago that I finally got to see what it was all about. I could not believe my eyes at just how awful it was. It was possibly the worst animated feature I have ever seen. Guffawingly bad in every way imaginable, contains daft, unlikable characters, inappropriate humor, such as the awkward innuendo between Freddy and the female British agent who flashes Freddy upon first meeting him, horrible story structure, mostly bad musical numbers, and even a song and dance number featuring Nazi-like soldiers and Ku Klux Klan members. Yes, that pretty much sums up that movie. It's a wild ride.
Yeah, I had only heard about that film through reputation while doing research on a video I did about cryptid cinema. It popped up in a list of Loch Ness Monster films, and I watched the first 5 minutes, and I was like, I don't think this really counts as a Loch Ness Monster movie.
There is the Loch Ness Monster does feature quite prominently in the film, but it's kind of meaningless as well.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a wild ride. Nick Hardy also got in touch with us, and he was talking about the people under the stairs, and he says, I first saw this when I was a bit too young in the early 90s. I think I was maybe 13. I remember it started well and we were enjoying it until my dad walked in when someone's insides were being eaten by the kids in the basement. It was then we decided to turn it off, and I didn't get round to finishing the movie until many years later. It always seemed too scary how wrong I was in hindsight. It's an odd film, the People Under the Stairs. Definitely much more of a comedy. But I guess when you're a kid, any gore or violence is terrifying.
Yeah. You wouldn't be wrong to put it in the horror section.
Yeah. But it is mostly a comedy, which is quite strange tonally.
Yeah.
Eddie Coulter also talked about FR07 and said, a blast from the past. I remember when the trailer for FR07 was being shown, I thought it looked entertaining, but didn't open at any theaters near me. I finally got to see it in 1995 on VHS, but it was Freddy the Frog version. I'll have to check out the original version. Never thought the Snorks would be mentioned. Hee hee. Yes, I did mention the Snorks. It's a very early childhood memory of mine. I'm sure it hasn't aged well, but it was, cartoons in the 90s. Fun times. And lastly, we heard from Wicked Person on a comment on FR07, another bit of language detected that doesn't translate in North America. I assume pot plants are what we call potted plants, unless we're talking about marijuana. Yes, I didn't even realize that was a strange language sort of translation. I do say pot plants and house plants, I guess. I would never say potted plants. So
Yeah. In America, pot plant means something very specific.
Oh, right. Okay. I will refrain from saying that from now on, because that's not what I'm growing. Not what I'm growing whatsoever.
People furiously Googling marijuana laws of Melbourne.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for getting in touch. It was wonderful to hear from all of you. All right, Serge, I guess we should move on to the movie for today. Would you like to fetch it for us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Oh, it's different now. I gotta enter a key code and this electronic to enter the Oubliette now.
Yeah, I think we just upgraded the security.
Oh wow, it's done up like a laboratory. There's all these computer screens everywhere that are all displaying the same Unis logo.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I found the film. It's embedded in this stack of these drippy, gooey eggs. Hang on. Okay.
Wow.
Okay, I got it. Okay, I'm coming back out.
Don't touch me with your extraneous organic matter.
What do you have for us today, Serge?
I have the 1993 American sci-fi horror film Carnosaur, written and directed by Adam Simon, which is based on the novel by John Brosnan, writing as Harry Adam Knight. It stars Diane Ladd, Raphael Sparge, Jennifer Runyon, Harrison Page, and a prominent cameo by Clint Howard, brother of Ron Howard. And I feel this should not go unsaid. It is produced by Roger Corman. Yes.
So what happens in this movie that is definitely not a ripoff of Jurassic Park?
Well, so when people start turning up gruesomely slaughtered in a remote Nevada town, it's up to plucky night watchman Doc Smith to find out who or what is behind the killings. Is it a bear, a cougar, a bobcat? Or perhaps it's a genetically engineered Deinonychus that escaped from a secret lab where an omnicidal scientist is busy conducting experiments to try and replace all the humans of the Earth with dinosaurs.
Wow.
This is Roger Corman we're talking about, so my money's on the latter.
Yes. All right, after the break. All right, and we are back to talk about Carnosaur. I had not seen this movie, but Serge, you are a master of Saurian cinema. I guess you've seen every single dinosaur movie ever made.
Well,
what was your sort of first impression of Carnosaur when you watched it?
So I first saw this film relatively recently, just in 2021. I'd known about it my whole life. It was one of those movies that, like, I would go to Blockbuster as a kid, and I would see the cover sitting there, and I would be like, "Oh, I really want to watch this," and my parents would be like, "It's rated R, you can't." And then by the time I was old enough to rent R-rated films on my own volition, the DVD was out of print. I'm pretty sure the last pressing was in 2003, and it's not on Blu-ray, and it's also one of those titles that, at least in the States, you can't even rent it digitally on any platform. Like, you can't pay like $3.99 on Amazon and watch it.
Yeah, right.
So 2021 rolled around, and I finally just paid like, I think it was like $40 for a used DVD.
Yeah.
And then I finally saw it.
Wow.
You asked me what were my first impressions of it, and then I told you a story about obtaining the disc. But I'll tell you, my first impression was not as much of a ripoff of Jurassic Park as I thought it would be.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of does feel like a Jurassic Park movie. The first kind of half an hour, maybe, but then it does deviate quite drastically,
quite a bit,
sort of. To a point where I was like, wow, we're going there? Okay, this is happening.
Yeah.
But it was released the same year as Jurassic Park, so they must have fast-tracked it.
Yes.
Knowing Jurassic Park was coming out in 1993. And I also noticed there are sequels, which I didn't know about.
Oh, yeah.
Like Carnosaur came out in 1995. Carnosaur 2 came out in 1995. Carnosaur 3, Primal Species in 1996. And then they also released a Raptor movie in 2001. So they did release 5 dinosaur movies in the time that Jurassic Park just released the first 3 of the trilogy, which is incredible. So I'm assuming a lot of people must have watched this thinking, oh, it's going to be just like Jurassic Park, but really isn't.
It's not. In either budget or frankly in the story. Once you're past the 30-minute mark, the story bears no resemblance.
Yeah. So do you know if it's similar to the book? Is that how the book goes?
So they changed a lot from the book, and it's mostly for budgetary reasons.
Sure.
I'm going to try to do this briefly, summarize the book. It came out in, I think, 1984. Written by I believe he's an Australian expat living in England at the time, John Brosnan, sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But so anyway, the book, it follows this reporter. There's a string of gruesome killings in this small, like, English hamlet. And it is attributed to an escaped Siberian tiger from this private zoo owned by Lord Penward. And the reporter who's investigating starts to notice suspicious irregularities,
right,
which seem to indicate that Lord Penward is lying about the fact that this is just an escaped Siberian tiger. And so like one of the few surviving victims of the many attacks is this little boy who he's in shock, and so it's sort of implied that he doesn't really understand what he saw, which is his sister and mother get eaten alive by a Deinonychus.
Right.
And so he just tells the reporter, he was like, "Oh no, it wasn't a tiger, it was a dinosaur." So he's like, "Okay, Penward is lying." The reporter, he basically gains access. He breaks into Penward's private estate, and he finds Penward has genetically recreated all of these dinosaurs.
Right.
And they escape. They are actually let out. And they basically, the second half of the book is just all these dinosaurs running loose in this rural English village, eating everybody that they come across.
Okay.
And then, like, the military gets called in, and they're basically killing the dinosaurs one by one. And it circles back to, like, the reporter is being pursued by, like, the biggest of them.
Okay. So it's a whole bunch of different dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It's not just one.
You're right. Yeah. It's a lot of different species, a lot of different specimens. And basically for the movie, they were like, okay, well, we can do 2.
Yeah. I was actually confused by that because I just thought, hey, it's the same dinosaur, just getting bigger. I didn't even realize it was 2 different dinosaurs in this movie. I mean, it's called Carnosaur, so I thought, it's just a Carnosaur, right? So I was really into dinosaurs growing up. I love dinosaurs. And my favorite dinosaur was the Deinonychus. That was my favorite dinosaur. And I wanted that dinosaur to be in Jurassic Park. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
They've repurposed the Velociraptor as a Deinonychus, essentially. Because the Velociraptor isn't that big. They're only like the size of chickens, right? They're tiny.
Well, they're a little bigger than chicken, but yeah. They're tiny.
Like a big chicken, I guess.
Yeah.
But not man-sized,
Right.
That sort of thing. So I was disappointed when they didn't have a Deinonychus in Jurassic Park, but they have one in Carnosaur, although you never really see it.
Yeah, certainly not. There's never a full body shot of the Deinonychus throughout the entire film, as far as I can remember. It is a puppet.
Yeah, or just like from the point of view of the Deinonychus, so you have this sort of night vision green filter moving very rapidly towards its victims with like a whooshing sound. Yeah, you don't really see it. You don't really see the dinosaurs until the T-Rex shows up, which I just thought was the same dinosaur, bigger. But I had no idea. And that's towards the end. I mean, one difference between this and Jurassic Park, it's definitely a horror.
Yeah.
Like Jurassic Park has elements of horror, but I wouldn't say it was a horror film.
Right.
Whereas this feels like a horror film. It feels like, hey, it's a creature feature, essentially. This animal or creature, dinosaur, killing people.
Yeah, it's one of the few attempts at dinosaur horror that actually takes that mission seriously. Like, there are other quote-unquote R-rated dinosaur films.
Sure.
But they're just like Sci-Fi Channel original movies that are R because there's like spurts of like CGI blood. Those are not taking themselves seriously as horror films, whereas this one did. This is one of the few, even to this day, that ever tried it. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, although you don't really see much in the sort of attack sequences, it's more like a lot of screaming, and you hear a tremendous amount of squelching sounds.
Yes,
but you don't really see a lot.
I picture a lot of Foley artists like furiously grabbing the insides of cantaloupes.
Yes, I do feel a lot of fruit were involved in the sound design for this movie. Yeah.
So basically, in terms of the differences between the book and the movie, my understanding is that 99% of the changes were for budgetary reasons. So like instead of a whole menagerie of dinosaurs overrunning this English village, it is one Deinonychus and then much later one T-Rex like attacking random people parked in their car in the middle of the desert. So it's like much more filmable that way.
Yes, especially in cars as well. So you can have that sort of wide shot with silhouettes. And not show anything really that's going on. I did find my main gripe with this movie is like a lot of very dark scenes.
Yes.
That you cannot see anything, just very badly lit scenes. And even like non-action scenes where it's like, why is it so dark in this room? Like the lab is just a dark cave with like maybe one or two lights and not much else.
Yeah, it's dark enough throughout the entire film that I wonder if it isn't an issue with the transfer. That they just like it could have just been a really, really cheap DVD.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'd be interested to see them release this on Blu-ray and actually do a proper scan of the negative, and because like I think the DVD that I have isn't even in widescreen.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a shame that we're working with such relatively poor elements. But then of course, it's like for all I know, they scan the original negative and it's still 4:3 and just as dark in every scene.
Yeah, maybe.
Because the other thing I'll say about this movie is that, of course, it was low budget compared to like any other monster film that was like got a theatrical release that year, but it was surprisingly expensive for a Roger Corman production.
Right.
It had a budget, I've read, $800,000 and $850,000, which is cheap for a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
But that was actually pretty lavish for Corman. And it wasn't just the raw number. They shot the whole movie in 18 days, which, again, lightning fast.
Yeah, wow.
But that's actually pretty generous for Corman. And in fact,
Yeah.
they shot it in 18 days, but they had like 6 months of pre-production
Wow.
to like build everything.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much where the $850,000 went, is towards these 2 puppets.
Right.
Not just the 2 puppets, but they also had a 16-foot tall T-Rex animatronic.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. So there wasn't a ton of money involved, but every dollar made it on screen.
Yeah. I did hear that there was also a suit as well, like a dino suit that a man wore, but they didn't use it, or they used only parts of it.
I'm not sure. There was a T-Rex hand puppet, there was a Deinonychus hand puppet, and I think they had some sort of like halfway between a hand puppet and a full-size Deinonychus,
Yeah.
which maybe was piloted by like a guy's torso instead of just his arm.
Okay. Yeah. Because there's definitely one scene where it does really look like a guy walking around in a dino suit, because it's quite inconsistent.
Yeah.
Every scene with the dinosaurs. That's why I just thought it was one dinosaur gradually growing bigger and bigger, or like versions of it just getting bigger and bigger, because it looked different every time. The first one is tiny. It's like this little scrappy, very vicious though, very vicious, scrappy little thing. And then it gets bigger and bigger, and that scene with the sheriff, like it's like full man, taller than a human sized, and then you've got the giant T-Rex at the end.
Yeah, the Deinonychus does look different in every attack. One of my gripes with this film is that the Deinonychus it goes from hatchling to full adult in like, I think it's about 2 days.
Yeah. We should get into the plot. I mean, when I first started watching it, I was very confused by who even was the main character, because there are so many characters that kind of rifles through. You've got Jane Tiptree, the mad scientist that creates these dinosaurs, and you don't really know her motivations. You just think she's making genetically modified chickens, but better chickens? I don't know exactly what she's trying to do.
Yeah.
And then you've got the night watchman, Doc, who is, I didn't even really know what his job was. Like, I don't know, because they kept kind of cutting between the staff of the chicken farm, like examining the chickens and then like taking the eggs away, and it's just so many characters that was kind of flicking through that I didn't even know what the purpose of Doc was, and then if he was even the main character, because it went through these young sort of teenagers having some joyride, and then they get attacked. Yeah, it was confusing.
Yeah, it's the kind of film where you don't realize Doc is the main character until he's like the only one you're still following after 45 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
At the point that he breaks into the lab, which is about at the halfway point of the film, you're like, oh, I guess he's the main character?
Yeah.
For being such a short film, it's only an hour and 23 minutes long, but yeah, the first half of the film is bouncing between lots of different characters who aren't so much driving the plot so much as they are like just trying to get their bearings on what's going on.
Yeah.
And like the only person who seems to know what's going on is Dr. Tiptree, the mad scientist, but she's also not influencing the plot at all for the first half. There's a lot of shots of her sitting in her laboratory, like watching a lot of security feeds of what the other characters are doing.
Yes.
It's not clear from moment to moment what she's watching them for, or even what she's really after.
Yeah.
And like people talk about what makes this film bad, because this film generally has a terrible reputation, which we can get into a little later. But like Roger Ebert called it the worst film of 1993. People hate this movie.
Wow, yeah.
And then they'll say that like, well, because it's a ripoff of Jurassic Park and the special effects suck. And I take issue with both of those points. I think the issues with this film are like really basic scripting fundamentals. And it's just like being unclear who the main character is, being unclear on character motivations and who's after what in any given scene and what they know. And yeah, that's all very messy in the first half.
Yes, I agree. Because I felt it was even though things were happening and you have all these attack sequences and people getting very gruesomely killed, it was kind of aimless. Like it didn't really have any sort of tension or agency with the characters at all. Like I didn't know who I was following. And it wasn't until sort of the second half when the second plot point kicks in that I thought, oh, I didn't know we were going in this direction. Hey, let's explore this.
Do we want to talk about the second act shift?
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, the first act is very much, yes, we've got a dinosaur killing people. It's pretty much a creature feature slasher almost with a monster. The second part of the movie shifts into Dr. Tiptree revealing that she's made a viral disease that immaculately conceives woman with a dinosaur baby.
Yep.
That they just give birth to.
Yeah.
Which is outrageous.
Yeah. So like there's only a couple of shots throughout the first half of the movie of like, oh, some people are starting to like cough. Some people are exhibiting flu-like symptoms. And then at the halfway point, when ostensibly our main character breaks into the lab and confronts Tiptree, he's like, what do you know about what's going on? She's like, I am behind this illness. It is a virus, that transforms women spontaneously into dinosaur gestation pods that kill the women when they give birth.
Yes.
And suddenly you realize this is a different kind of film now.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine if at the halfway point of Tremors, they found out that the graboids were spreading a virus that made people spontaneously give birth to baby graboids and die.
Yeah. It's a definite plot shift for sure.
Yeah.
It's very reminiscent of Alien and Aliens as well, especially with that final scene with the T-Rex and the Bobcat bulldozers. It feels very much like the final scene in Aliens.
Yeah.
With Ripley. And you've got a chestburster scene as well. Kind of. Well, it's like it comes out of his stomach, but she rips his stomach open.
She sure does.
I don't know. It's...
Yeah, Diane Ladd's last appearance in the film is she very calmly lays down on the floor because she has become infected with her own virus.
Yeah.
And she very calmly lays down and lets this little baby dinosaur pop out of her stomach, and she helps pull the wound apart to help it out.
Why are you doing that?
There is a lengthy speech that she gives about her motivations.
So much exposition.
Yeah.
Just like the biggest exposition dump I've ever witnessed on film.
Yeah. So the main character has broken into this laboratory and he's got Dr. Tiptree at gunpoint. And he's like, you explain to me what's going on. And she explains the whole thing with the escaped dinosaur, and she's been doing these experiments and she goes on at length about how she always admired dinosaurs and thought that they were the greatest creatures that ever walked the earth, and she despises mankind, and she's like, what better creature to replace mankind than the dinosaurs? But the thing is, she's giving this speech over several scenes, and they're intercutting other scenes of people outside the laboratory going about their business, and those scenes that they're intercutting are like they're taking place at day and then night and then day again, and it's like and I know it's just bad continuity, but when you watch the film you get the sense that she is taking days to explain her motivation.
Yeah. I mean, it's confusing though when they start introducing this viral aspect, this kind of disease, because I don't even know how it's being transmitted. Is it just like a common flu that people are just giving to each other? It's never really explained. And it's secondary to the dinosaurs attacking people, because I'm assuming it came from one of the chicken eggs, right?
Well, first I'll say they definitely don't confirm. They barely even confirm how the Deinonychus got out. I mean, I know we technically know, but anyway, they don't tell us how it gets transmitted.
Yeah.
I don't even think they properly established that people in town are getting sick. it was only on my second watch that I was like, oh yeah, that background actor is coughing a lot, or oh yeah, that character with one line in the diner looks really sweaty and haggard.
Yeah.
But watching the first time, it wasn't until the halfway point of the movie that I was like, wait, people are getting sick?
Yeah, I mean, there's the sheriff's wife. She says that she's getting sick and her kids are getting sick. And does that mean that her daughters are going to give birth to a Deinonychus as well? That's like insane.
Yeah.
But there is also one part of the movie with this sort of text coming up.
Yes.
Where this green text that comes up, but it appears at the very start of the movie, and you don't know what it even means until halfway through when you realize, oh, it says how much of the population has been infected with the virus, but you don't know that until halfway. But it's always said it. And so I had no idea what this text meant until halfway through.
I wrote the same thing down. That was my second note. They start the first several scenes with this big giant paragraph of neon green text, which is hard to read in standard def.
Yes.
And it's only on screen for a couple of seconds. I was never able to finish a block of text before it was gone.
Yeah.
and it's talking about infected cells per million. But yeah, it's like, I wonder if they didn't add that in post because they're like, people aren't going to know that everyone's getting sick. And it's like the text did not help establish that.
Yeah. I mean, initially I thought, is this how many dinosaurs are in this area of population? Like that many infected eggs or something? I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah.
It was very, very confusing. But yes, so you have all these women giving birth to dinosaurs that just go around killing everyone. And then to combat that, there is some dialogue of them trying to create a male, and I had no idea what that meant. They were trying to create a male dinosaur to stop this from happening. I was confused.
I'll be 100% honest. I did not catch any such line.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. Because other than that, I guess they go around killing everyone. So you've got all these guys in hazmat suits just gunning everyone down.
Yeah, so the government eventually gets wise to this virus that Diane Ladd is unleashing, and they quarantine the town, put up roadblocks, and then dudes in hazmat suits with machine guns just start killing everyone who tries to leave the town.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Like these are kids and women, and just they walk into the clinic or whatever it was and just shoot everyone.
Yeah. I think there's a way to do it right where, like, the first act, the threat is this Deinonychus running around. And then the second act is, oh no, there's these genetic experiments are threatening to destroy the world. And then the third act, it's the government that becomes the antagonist. Mm-hmm. It's the government guys are sort of like, look, we love Dr. Triptree's brilliant mind, and like she's created dinosaurs and it's fascinating, but she's gone too far here. Yeah. And we need to stop her.
Yeah. I mean, it did seem like a very 90s theme of the environment, you know, like, hey, we need to stop all these people cutting down rainforests. Like, it just seemed like a very 90s popular theme to have. You have like the character of that we haven't mentioned yet, Thrush, very unfortunate name, who is kind of the love interest with Doc. So she's an activist that he finds because he's a night watchman for this mine. I'm not even sure what he's a night watchman for.
I've heard it referred to as just a rock quarry.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you have all these activists protesting the construction, excavation. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And Thrush is one of them. She's one of the activists. It was very common in the 90s to have this theme. I'm thinking of like Captain Planet and Fern Gully, and even movies like Free Willy and Ocean Girl. It was a very 90s thing, but then very bleak ending at the end where they they kill everyone. And the final ending, like, spoilers here, you've got Thrush and Doc escaping the T-Rex or taking it down with the Bobcats. And they escape with this, what do they call it? The raw viral serum, which I don't know what they're doing with, because he injects Thrush at one point because she has been infected, but I'm pretty sure you can't just inject someone with
Yeah.
raw viral serum, expect everything to be A-okay.
It's very much a MacGuffin serum.
Yeah.
But ostensibly it cures the illness, and he carries enough of it out of the laboratory to try and mass produce and save the world. But it doesn't go like that.
No.
Because after they've killed the T-Rex and Thrush is cured, he's just sitting around waiting for the government to come in and rescue them. The people who show up are these guys in hazmat suits.
Yeah.
And they just, I don't think there's a single word exchange between them. They just open fire.
Yeah.
And they kill him and Thrush, and then they torch it.
Yeah. Flamethrower, everything. Yeah. And then credits roll.
Yep.
And it's devastating. But it's almost like, what was the point in this movie? Like,
But I think it was a conscious inversion of the typical sci-fi movie monster. Like in the 50s would have saved the world, and I think they were just like, let's do something different. Let's invert that.
Yeah.
And they said it doesn't matter. It ends, and I'm like, there's very much a feeling of like, that's it.
yeah, exactly. So you don't have the triumphant, happy ending. It's just bleak, like humans suck, and we will continue to literally kill each other no matter what. And I don't know, like, what is the end takeaway from this movie? Like,
I think it points the blame very squarely on corporations, first of all, because there's very pointed talk in the film, repeated talk about like the pollution that all that causes, and not just pollution, but I was shocked for a film that came out in 1993 how much they were talking about GMOs.
Yes, I know.
Nobody had the term GMO, but one of the first scenes is this government guy who's trying to convince a senator to allow this company to release this genetically modified organism onto the market. And you hear him on the phone talking to the senator being like, look, if cows are fine and turnips are fine, what's wrong with releasing a creature that's a little bit cow and a little bit turnip, right?
Yeah. I mean, because it was a huge issue in the early, I guess the late 90s, early 2000s of GMO and genetically modified crops and everything. There was a lot of concern and people deciding to eat organic or no sprays. Like it's not something we talk about anymore now. It just seems to be accepted and no one cares. But back then it was a huge deal. And like 1993, this is way before it became a sort of more public, people being concerned about produce and food.
Yeah, I was surprised how much emphasis there was on it. And not even, they weren't even necessarily like criticizing the concept of GMOs, but of greedy people in suits not caring about what they actually do to people.
Yeah.
And there's this great scene, one of the few inspired bits of filmmaking, I think, is one of the last scenes of the film is all the government guys are sitting around a table and they're talking about the implications of this virus. And they're like, okay, well, it's going to kill all the women on Earth. And they're like, okay, that's bad. But then they were like, and they're like, well, you know, we could start regrowing people in artificial wombs. Like, that's one way to repopulate the population. And then they're like, and you know what? We could, like, tinker with their genes and, like, replace, and they're like, again, very bad that all the women of the earth are going to die, but we could replace them with even better women. And they're going back and forth for some time, and then they cut to a shot of this one woman sitting at the table with them.
Yeah.
And she's just, you guys got to look it up on YouTube or something, but the clip of her just like looking down at the table being like, it's just fantastic.
I think that is the scene that I'm talking about in terms of I was being confused about them having a solution of having a male. I think that's what they were talking about. I thought they were talking about the dinosaurs, like getting a male dinosaur. I didn't realize they were trying to repopulate the earth with males in an artificial... Okay, that all makes sense now. I was so confused by that scene.
Yeah, they do not do a good job of, like, even that scene where they're talking as if the virus infecting half the world is a foregone conclusion, but, like, the town is still under quarantine at that point. They're still sending guys in to torch everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, which is it? Are you giving up or are you trying to kill everybody? Also, like there are scenes, multiple scenes of men also getting sick.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
And so it's like, well, is it killing everyone or is it killing women? Like the movie gave us conflicting information there.
Yeah, yeah. And also just how it was transmitted as well. Like if you were in contact with a dinosaur, would you get the disease, or was it
no explanation as to how it's spread.
Exclusively people to people, like, air particles. Like I was very confused by that.
Yep.
Now it's time for random trivia.
All right, it's trivia time. Serge, what do you have covered in chicken feathers for us today?
So I have this interview with the guy who built the puppets.
Ah, yes.
Let me get his name right here. So the creature effects, special makeup creature effects was John, I have no clue how to pronounce his last name, John Buchler. And so he gave this interview in this book that I have called the Dinosaur Filmography. And he talks about the constraints of building the animatronics, it being a recognizably huge task going in. The puppets get a lot of flack from all the reviews.
Yeah.
They always compare it to Jurassic Park, and they're like, well, these suck. But I found this interview which I thought contextualized the challenges really well. And he says, about 7 of the 10 weeks allocated for dino making was spent on the miniature T-Rex, leaving only 3 weeks to construct the life-size 16-foot-tall model.
Wow.
Sheets of a high-strength, lightweight polyurethane called L200 were cut, shaped, and glued together to form the understructure, which was then covered with urethane foam skin. A scaly texture was added by manually searing the pattern into the foam with a hot tool. Due to the light weight, the movements of the huge Rex could be produced by simple pneumatic actuators. And then he says, if we create the full-size creature with standard procedures and sculpt it and mold it and cast it, it would weigh close to 2.5 tons. The final creature that I delivered weighed 450 pounds.
Wow. That's incredible.
Which I thought was really cool, that they had to focus on making it super lightweight. Not only so that it would be cheaper, but so that it would be easier to operate.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it's huge. That is huge. 16 feet.
Yeah. It's a shame that I'm trying to think of shots of it standing next to something that demonstrate how tall it was. And I basically come up with that little mini tractor or the little mini bulldozer is the only thing you see it standing next to.
Right. Yeah. That's great. And that's our trivia. Should we talk about the dinosaurs a little bit more?
Yeah. There was only 2. There's a Deinonychus and there's a T-Rex.
Yes.
The T-Rex makes one brief appearance towards the beginning of the film when one of the workers of the genetics laboratory is fed to it.
Yeah, the strange laser room where there's like strobing lighting that I'm not sure whether the strobing lighting is doing anything, but there's also these laser lights that he can't touch because they chop his hand in half.
Yep.
But yeah, I wasn't sure about the size of the dinosaur. Like, I didn't even know it was a T-Rex at that point because it just didn't look that big. But then you saw it at the end and it's quite huge.
Yep.
But then at the same time, it seems to change its size, like scene to scene.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's just because they were working with different puppets and using like puppets versus animatronics.
Yeah.
And I read in the interviews that they planned a lot of like forced perspective shots that wound up not getting shot. I was reading an interview with the guy who did the effects, and he was talking about how they weren't on set whenever something was being shot that didn't have a dinosaur in it. And that's a problem because in order to mesh shots with dinosaurs in them with shots that don't have dinosaurs in them, the visual effects department needs to be talking to the cinematographer and the director, and they did not do that apparently.
Right, yeah.
So the dinosaurs are presented pretty piecemeal. Like, they look different from shot to shot, and they look very different from scene to scene.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of scenes where you show dinosaur and then you show actors, and they just don't seem to be even in the same location.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there is a lot of sort of disconnect with editing, and also just being very dark.
Yeah.
Like even that final scene with the bobcats and the T-Rex. Like it's you really can't tell what's going on.
Yeah, this was my second watch of it the other day, and I'm watching that final fight between. You've been using the term bobcat, which I would just like to clarify for American listeners. It's like a little tiny bulldozer. It's not like the mammal bobcat.
Yeah. That's right.
Doc jumps into this little tiny bulldozer, and he's just sort of like ramming the T-Rex with it. Anyway, I'm watching this scene, and it wasn't until the scene ended that I sort of snapped out of this reverie, and I was like, "Oh, I zoned out. I was not watching that scene."
Yeah.
It's just kind of just like shot of the Rex roaring and shot of the guy at the controls, and like I've read interviews where they're like, "Oh yeah, we just totally ripped off Aliens. It was a shot-for-shot remake of the power loader scene." And I was like, "That might have been your inspiration, but you did not pull it off."
Yeah. I mean, it definitely reminded me of Aliens, but yeah, not quite as riveting.
With regard to the dinosaurs like changing sizes between scenes, I think the movie was aware on some level that had to be addressed. And there's one scene that I appreciated that threw it in there. There is this town doctor who's doing autopsies on all the victims. And he's pointing out, he's like pointing at one body, then he points at the other body. He's like, this is the same kind of injury, but the one over here is twice the size. And so they're like, it's either multiple animals doing this or it's getting bigger really fast. And I appreciated that line.
Yeah. I mean, I like that sort of science fiction element of like, how could this animal grow so quickly? And yeah.
I'm willing to suspend my disbelief. It's like, it's a genetic experiment. Sure, why can't it achieve full size in 48 hours? That would even explain why it's eating like 30 people in 2 days. But when it's unclear to the audience that there are two different species at work, it's kind of a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I was confused by... So you've got Dr. Tiptree working for a chicken farm, making genetically modified chickens, but she's actually making dinosaurs. Because there's a scene at the very, very start, which is pretty horrifying as well. You've got a chicken farm footage. I'm assuming like battery farms, and you see these chickens getting not exactly killed, but on a production line in black and white. But you have all this text coming up with like animals, different animals. So we'll say vulture, iguana, albatross, crocodile. And I thought, is she combining all of these animals into some mega animal? Like, how is she actually making a dinosaur? Like, there's no mention of dinosaur DNA like in Jurassic Park with the mosquitoes. Like, how is she creating dinosaurs from normal animals? You
have now asked more questions about how she made dinosaurs than the film did, than the filmmakers did.
Yeah.
Because, the film does not give us an explanation. She's just like, oh, she's a mad scientist and she made dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Whereas the book actually goes into pretty lengthy detail.
All right.
So what the book says is that first they figured out the genetic blueprint for a dinosaur through like finding little bits of pieces of dinosaur DNA inside of especially well-preserved fossils.
Right.
Then what they did was they worked from that blueprint and they took modern chicken DNA and just sort of altered the genomes until it looked like their blueprint, and then they grow it in an artificial womb, and then out pops a dinosaur.
Right.
Which is, it's interestingly, I'm not going to say it's plausible, but it's the kind of explanation that works in a sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
Whereas the movie just like had no interest, and that was kind of disappointing for me.
Yeah, it was. But it was also interesting that they did go down the avian route of dinosaurs.
Yes.
Because I feel like in the 90s, everyone just thought dinosaurs were reptiles, lizards. They had no one connected birds to dinosaurs at any point in the 90s.
So I'm going to go on a digression.
Yes.
So when the first theropods, like Megalosaurus, when they were first dug up out of the ground, and professional biologists took a look at them, they said, these are birds.
Right.
All the best anatomists of the time, they were like, these don't look like lizard bones, these look like bird bones. And it wasn't until they started discovering the sauropods, the long necks, that had these giant massive bulks. And of course, sauropods are not descended from birds. So people were like, well, these don't look like birds. And it's like, well, yeah, they're a different lineage. But nevertheless, they were like, well, these look like big giant lizards that probably couldn't even support the whole weight on land. And so then the image started to change to like dumb, slow reptiles.
Right.
And then it was in the 60s and 70s, there were new discoveries, like they discovered Deinonychus in the 60s, and then paleontologist by the name of Robert Bakker comes out with a book called The Dinosaur Heresies. And he's like, no, our first instinct was right. These are birds, and they probably behaved a lot like birds. They were probably quick-moving and warm-blooded. The book, Carnosaur, was written in 1984, and it's parroting all this stuff, talking about how, no, yeah, they're birds. They're not lizards. So it had been around. It had been solid within the scientific community since the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And I think what happened was Jurassic Park finally punched through public consciousness and popularized it.
Yeah, right. And made it lizards.
My impression is that Jurassic Park popularized the idea that dinosaurs are more related to birds than lizards.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. That's Alan Grant's whole thing, right? He's like, check out all of these anatomical features in a raptor that they share with birds.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Because I feel like Jurassic Park just solidified, hey, they're just reptiles again. Because, like, none of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park have feathers. Whereas, like, when I was looking at dinosaurs or, like, impressions of dinosaurs now, illustrations always put feathers now. Whereas back in the 90s, it was all scales and very reptilian.
That's true. My understanding there is that they didn't have well-preserved feather remains at that point.
Yeah.
But they've made a lot of discoveries since Jurassic Park, which indicate that almost all theropods probably had some form of filament.
Yeah, right.
Like, I don't think they had, like, feathered T-Rex fossils back when Jurassic Park came out.
Yeah. So did the T-Rex actually have feathers?
So when last I checked on this, they think that juveniles might have had some sort of filamentation, primitive feathers.
Yeah.
And that they were likely shed by the time they became an adult.
Right.
But other species did have feathers as adults. I mean, almost all raptors, we've got good feather remains of those.
Yeah. Wow. I guess I'm just comparing my childhood knowledge of dinosaurs, which was, very limited in the 90s as well. I remember the only feathered dinosaur was the Archaeopteryx. And there was links to other dinosaurs kind of having feathers, but it was still always portrayed without feathers. I never saw illustrations with dinosaurs with feathers.
So I guess when I say that Jurassic Park cements the connection between dinosaurs and birds in the public consciousness, I think I just mean that people started to think of dinosaurs as the ancestors of birds.
Yes. Right.
Whereas before, they didn't think of any evolutionary connection between them.
Yeah, right.
Coming to you live from the movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
Hello, it's everyone's favourite part of the pod, the Mobley Awards, where we nominate our favourite dinosaur claw-skewered parts of the film in a number of, oh my god, I'm giving birth to a Deinonychus categories.
Best quote.
So my favorite quote is when Doc bursts into the lab and he's got Dr. Tiptree at gunpoint.
Yeah.
And he sees the stack of eggs and he goes, where did these come from? And she goes, I made them. And then he says my favorite line of the film. He goes, you made them? What, did you lay them yourself?
It's great.
This should also not go unstated, but Diane Ladd is Laura Dern's mother.
Yeah, I know. And also Clint Howard is in this, and his niece, Bryce Dallas Howard, is in Jurassic World. So,
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of connections to Jurassic Park.
Yep.
Franchise. There are actually quite a few funny lines in this movie. There's one near the start. Doc is watching some sort of movie about lobotomy or something. I'm not sure. It's like, it looks like a horror movie or something. And he says, while holding a bottle of beer, he says, better a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy, which is great.
Best hair or costume?
When all the environmentalists chain themselves to the bulldozer, there's like this lead hippie with like a long gray ponytail.
Yeah.
That scene wasn't lit very well, so it might not have actually been a long ponytail.
Right.
But whatever his hair was conveyed lead hippie very well.
Yeah. I didn't find a lot of hair and costume to be that noteworthy in this movie.
Yeah.
It felt very drab and quite sort of not a lot of thought involved with any of the hair and costume.
Yeah. It felt almost like they didn't have a hair and makeup department.
Yeah. They just the actors just showed up. It's like, this is fine.
Yeah.
Clothes, good.
Yeah.
Most 90s moment.
What I came up with was like the weaponization of Dinomania in order to pre-sell the film. Just like
right. Yes.
Just like the concept that dinosaurs were about to go supersonic in the summer of 93, and Roger Corman made a whole film to capitalize on that.
I felt like it was very late 80s, early 90s Dinomania. Like everything, I'm just thinking of just like cartoon-wise. Like growing up and me loving dinosaurs, I was just in heaven. There's just like so many dinosaur TV shows.
Yeah.
Like even Transformers had Dinobots.
Yep.
And we've got Land Before Time. You've got Barney. He's a purple dinosaur. You've got Denver the Last Dinosaur.
Yep.
Extreme Dinosaurs. We're Back, a dinosaur story. Dino Riders. That really strange Jim Henson show, Dinosaurs, with like sort of it's like the sitcom like nuclear family, but they're all dinosaurs talking. So it was just the 90s were mad for dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Favorite scene?
So I know we've been mocking this scene for most of this podcast, but it's probably when Doc interrogates Dr. Tiptree in her lab.
Really?
Well, because okay, all right, let me revise that. It's not that it's my favorite scene, but some of my favorite little details are in there.
Yeah.
Like I just love that he has a gun on her. So ostensibly, she is explaining her plan and her motivations because he's got a gun pointed at her, but her tone and the way that she delivers it all, it's almost as if she's been dying to tell people what she's been up to. And she's like so excited to be like, I have created a virus to kill all humans and replace them with dinosaurs. I'm so glad you asked.
Yes.
She has such a dry, self-serious delivery. Like she has a line in that scene where she's like, mankind, when was man ever kind? And then Doc, played by Raphael Sparge, he's so sardonic and sarcastic at his replies. I like the energy that they have bouncing between them in that scene.
Yeah. My favorite scene, I really liked the showdown between Sheriff Fowler and the Deinonychus. Like,
oh yeah,
it's like a different movie. Because first of all, the location doesn't look small town whatsoever. It looks like you're in the middle of New York. You've got a phone booth and like a very blue lit urban cityscape, essentially, street. And yeah, he has a showdown with the dinosaur with a shotgun. He does manage to shoot the dinosaur and it's down and you think, oh wow, this is amazing. He's taken down a dinosaur, but then the dinosaur like skewers him from behind with its velociraptor claw. And then the sheriff shoots him again, and it's like I wanted more of that in the movie. I wanted more scenes like that where you got to see the dinosaur for one thing. And it's a lot of gore. It's really gruesome. It's proper horror movie.
Most cliche moment.
So for most cliched sci-fi horror moment, I was gonna say that the bulldozer sequence is a ripoff of Aliens, but I'm gonna say it goes further back than that because there is a film from 1960 called Dinosaurus,
right?
With these very cheap. It's a T-Rex and an apatosaur get thawed out of some ice and they go wild on this like Caribbean island.
Okay.
And that movie ends with them killing the T-Rex with the bulldozer.
Ah, wow.
So they say they were ripping off Aliens, and I'm like, don't flatter yourself. You weren't ripping off Aliens. You were ripping off something that was equally low budget.
Yeah, right.
From about 25 years earlier than Aliens.
Okay. The cliche I wanted to point out is, I don't know why this always happens in movies where they find a completely mangled corpse beyond recognition, and they always say, oh, it looks like it was attacked by a wild animal, maybe a bobcat. Like, what? Why would you ever go there? Like, there's no way. Bobcats are tiny.
Yeah, they mentioned bobcats as like their working theory like 3 times, and I'm like, what? I'm like, not a bear, not a cougar. There was a bear, cougar, or wolf would still be bad guesses, but they'd be better than a bobcat.
Yeah.
Best special effect.
So I didn't want to say the dinosaurs because that's where all the money and effort went. I think, honestly, the special effect that worked the best for me is when the sheriff is in his kitchen making an omelet and he cracks an egg, it just shoots out this green goo.
Yeah.
And I know it's just food coloring, but it got me. I was like, oh man, there's something wrong with that egg.
Yeah, and then he cracks another one, and the little dinosaur hatchling is inside, and it's tiny and it's moving like it's an animatronic.
Right, yeah, it's tiny, but it's like articulated and it's wriggling around in his palm.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought that was really well done.
Yeah. I mean, special effect for me, I mean, the stomach bursting scene it's a rip-off, obviously, of Alien, but like it worked pretty well. It looked disgusting and horrifying. Like it's yeah.
Especially when she like helps widen the wound to facilitate. Yeah.
Favorite sound effect.
My favorite sound effect is the Deinonychus has 2 distinct vocalizations.
Yes.
The first one is like some very generic bird of prey screech.
Yeah.
It very clearly comes from a library. It is not the red-tailed hawk screech.
No, it's not.
But it's like the second most popular bird of prey. Yes. And then the other vocalization it makes is when it's like eating someone. It's some Foley artist. It's like they put their palm up to their mouth in front of the microphone and they're just like,
yeah. I mean, I likened it to the Cookie Monster. Like it really felt like, we're just eating cookies now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found the dinosaur sounds very lackluster and very disappointing. I think at one point they do put like an electronic sort of chorus effect on the growls, but it makes it sound like an alien or something. It doesn't sound like an animal anymore. It sounds too like synthetic. I don't know.
Most funniest moment.
It's the shot that made me howl is when the sheriff dies.
Yeah.
He's standing over the Deinonychus and it kicks upward and it lands right in the seat of his pants.
That's right.
And then they pull back and they show the sickle claw emerging from his stomach, curving up towards his face. And I'm like, okay, so that claw would have to be about 3 feet long and in the shape of an S.
Yeah.
In order to enter that way and exit that way.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I mean,
and it kills me every time I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my favorite, funniest moment was this masterpiece of dialogue between Doc and Thrush. She says, I wanted to give you this. And he replies, what is it? She says, it represents the earth and friendship. He replies, it looks like a knot. She says, it is a knot. He then says, I don't even really know your name. And then she replies with Thrush. It's like, wow, who wrote this?
Adam Simon.
That's crazy. That's like the worst dialogue writing I've ever witnessed on screen. It's terrible.
Yeah.
All right. And that's our movie awards.
Hi, this is Tom Woodruff Jr., and you're listening to Movie Oubliette.
Okay, final verdict time. Should Carnosaur from 1993 be unleashed into the world in all its saurian glory to stomp around and be celebrated, or should it be shot with Sheriff Fowler's shotgun and be pushed back into the oubliette by a bobcat bulldozer? Lost forever. Serge, you have introduced me to Carnosaur. What's your final verdict on the movie?
Okay, my final verdict is I think it should be released.
Oh.
With a couple of caveats. I think 90% of the human beings on planet Earth will get nothing from this movie. But I think the other 10%, this is a good movie to recommend to the right audience. For the people who know the limitations of the production going in, who know that the script is it's classically not good. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of problems with the script. It needs to be tightened up. A lot of things needed to be clarified. But I think it's doing enough interesting things, enough new things, enough bold things, enough things that at the very least you've never seen in any other dinosaur film.
Right, yes.
And the key ingredient is that they knew they weren't making a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. And so the lead actors, they know they're not making Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I think the main character, Doc, played by Raphael Sbarge, who went on to have a really long and illustrious career in voiceover work. Mm-hmm. The most famous role that I know him from, he voiced Karth Onasi in Knights of the Old Republic.
Ah, right.
And as soon as I dialed into what his voice sounded like in that, I was like, oh, I actually recognize him from a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. I think he's got the right touch of wit and sarcasm and just being this cynical dork who doesn't care about anything, or at least projects that he doesn't care about anything. Anyway, I'm getting far away from the film now, but I think it can be recommended to the right audience with the understanding that it had some interesting things going on that nobody else had the guts to ever attempt.
Yeah, right. Ooh, well, I mean, I will say it does things. Yeah, I've never seen it on screen before. It was very brave to go in the direction it did halfway through to this viral outbreak movie. Not what I expected, but I don't know. I do think it's very unclear with its plot and how things are happening. The horror gore scenes are very disappointing, apart from that one with the sheriff. I kind of wanted the sheriff to be the main character. I was rooting for him more so than Doc.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like Doc really did that much. I don't know. Of course he did confront Tiptree and get the serum. Yeah, the ending is so bleak and almost what happened? Very abrupt, and I don't know whether I would recommend this movie. And I like dinosaurs, but I do appreciate that they did a dino horror, which is pretty amazing and doesn't really exist outside of this. I would love to see a full-blown, terrifying dinosaur horror. And it does try, but I don't think it delivers quite.
And also it is not classically good. It is not good.
Yeah.
And when I watch it, half the joy for me is thinking about how I would take the ideas that they have that were good and flesh them out and beef them up and essentially remake the film in my head. That is a big source of the pleasure for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think what just completely derails me with the film is if you made it a different creature, not a dinosaur, I think it would work better as a movie, as a sort of weird viral outbreak movie where a creature's birthed and then it spread. I guess that's Alien, really, but it just, the whole dinosaur aspect of it just wasn't explained enough. It was definitely trying to ride on the popularity of hey, Jurassic Park's about to come out, let's cash in. Let's insert dinosaurs.
Corman was very explicit that is precisely why the movie got greenlit.
Yeah. It's still great that they based it on an already existing novel.
Yeah.
It's not
it is not a ripoff.
Yeah. And that was written before Jurassic Park as well, right? It was.
Yep. Yeah, it came out in 84.
So if anything, maybe Michael Crichton was influenced by the novel Carnosaur. I don't know. But yeah. All right. Well, I guess we should check in with our patrons on what they thought about this. Hello, Hal.
Yes, Dan?
Our patron vote, please.
After all that voting, we've ended with a tie.
So it's a right on the nose 50-50 split with this. They're not sure. So Chazilla said, I was torn on this one. I think it should go free. Audiences need to see what Saurian cinema was like without Harryhausen or ILM. I'm guessing Corman was visiting Universal Studios and found the script for Jurassic Park left on the copy machine. Someone was obviously a big fan of aliens fighting the T-Rex with bobcats instead of a mech suit. I kept waiting for the chest burster scene and I was not disappointed. Eddie Coulter says, the way I've voted in the past, it should have been no surprise that I think Carnosaur should be free to lay its eggs all about. The late John Carl Buechler did such a great job with the dinosaur effects, and those alone make the movie worth seeing. And Film Aficionado said, Carnosaur opened my eyes to so many new experiences in those scant 83 minutes that we spent together during that perfect winter of 1993. The first time I've watched a rubber puppet chow down on hippies. The first time I saw a human woman give birth to a live dinosaur. While I've moved on and found other B movies, I will always have a special place for you in my heart, dear Carnosaur. So yes, it's gonna be a coin toss.
Coin of fate.
The coin of fate.
Serge, would you like to do honors, heads or tails?
Let's go with heads.
Oh, it's tails, unfortunately. So, Carnosaur, I'm afraid to say you are back into the oubliette.
No mankind win with man ever.
That's fair. As the person who voted to release it, I will say that dinosaurs I do think they deserve better films than this.
Yes, yes.
I would throw my heart and soul into remaking this into a film that worked. And perhaps my instinct here is just that releasing it from the oubliette would make that more likely.
Yes.
So now comes my second favorite point on every episode is, what's the next movie going to be?
Well, Conrad actually recently bought a Arrow Video Enter the Video Store box set from Charles Band's Empire International Pictures. The movies consisted of The Dungeon Master, Dolls, Cellar Dweller, Arena, and Robot Jocks. So we put it out to our patrons. We put a poll.
I got to vote in that poll.
Yes. To see which one you guys wanted us to do. And that movie is Robot Jocks. Which it's one of those movies that's like, how did this not get more popular? But I haven't seen it. It's a 1990 American post-apocalyptic mecha sci-fi film directed by Stuart Gordon, starring Gary Graham, Anne Marie Johnson, Paul Koslow, and Robert Sampson. Yeah, it sounds really cool. Like wow, I can't believe this existed in 1990. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this big, I guess, a mech battle movie. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've only seen it once, but it was since COVID, so only within the last 4 years. I was as being such a big fan of Pacific Rim, people keep telling me I really ought to watch Robot Jocks.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's all I should say.
Okay. So, Serge, thank you again for standing in for Conrad while he's gallivanting in Toronto at the at TIFF. Which
Probably watching better films than us.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I would be interested to hear what Conrad has to say about Carnosaur. But where can our listeners follow you on social media and find out more of your content online?
So the quickest way to find me is to Google Cold Crash Pictures. That's where I am on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Patreon, etc. But YouTube is the primary platform.
Yes, yes, yes. Anything coming up?
Yeah, I'm actually working on it's going to be one of my longer videos. It's like an hour and 20 minute video about
Wow.
conservation in the Jurassic Park series. And specifically how the original trilogy, it has a very hands-off, isolationist approach to conservation. We need to leave nature alone. And then in the sequel trilogy, it's flipped, and we got to get in there and save nature. It's a very interventionist approach.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
And so I'm working on finishing that one up. It's actually been the kitten, like dedicating all my spare time for the last week to the kitten has sort of slowed down progress.
Right.
But it should pick up again soon.
Oh, I can't wait to watch that. Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listeners, if you want to follow Movie Oubliette, you can follow us on all platforms as Movie Oubliette. And you can also email us at movie.oubliette@gmail.com. You can support us on Patreon as well. There are a few different tiers. You get access to extended segments of the pod, like the trivia and movie awards, bonus episodes with guests, and our monthly minisode, which we have covered many different topics, including Hudson Hawk, our favorite vampire movies. I think we talked about the Jurassic Park franchise.
Yeah, I think you ranked them. Yeah.
At one point, which was fun. And also our $10 patrons have executive producer credits, our Knights of the Keep, so to speak. So thank you so much to Iconographer, Ryan A. Potter, Chisella, Eddie Coulter, Evan Goodchild, Dr. Doggy, Isaac Sutton, and Serge from Cold Crash Pictures.
Worth every penny.
Yes.
I will say.
Yes. We also have a YouTube channel and merchandise at Redbubble. And rate us and review us if you haven't already. Thanks again, Serge, for standing in for Conrad.
Thanks for having me.
Can't wait for you to join us again, maybe for Tammy and T-Rex. But we will see. All right, listeners, goodbye.
Bye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie Oubliette.
That's my wife you're talking about. Strangely orgasmic matter.